Hey guys, how you doing? My name is Anthony Chiappone with CHAUVET Professional, and this is Tech Talk. On today's Tech Talk, we're going to be covering two key topics: dynamic video wall mapping and image processing for larger canvas sizes. Let's get going. For this video, we're using the Smart LCT software. This software is connected via USB or Ethernet to the VIP Drive 83R Nova. It has 8 outputs, 3 inputs, and the R stands for rotation. This is a cool drive because it has 8 outputs so that we can go ahead and connect video strips and video panels to our same screen. When you open up the software, this is your little pop-up window. If you don't have a mapping created, select Create Online Design. To save time, I've already created one, so I'm going to open my recent project here. You can see in the screen here that I have a total of 7 panels wide at the top. Physically, all these panels are actually the same width, but what you're seeing here is the actual LED size. The center panels there are at the f2, they're 168 wide. The left and the right side are the f3, they're 128 wide. This is one of the challenges that we're going to have to overcome in the scaling. I'm going to show you that in the next window. I'm just going to make a note quickly. The small strips you see at the bottom left and the bottom right, or the middle left and the middle right, those are the F6 strip IP. Those are 144 LEDs long by 5 LEDs wide. You can see how I mapped them here, and we're going to have to take a note of all of this mapping in our next software. This is going to be our playback software. For this example, we're using Resolume. I'm going to close this out and open that up. I will make a quick note that there are a wide variety of software that you can use. You have Resolume, Archaeas, you have Hippo, you have D3. There's a lot of them out there. They're all really great and have their own advantages. We're just showing you this demo with Resolume. When you're in the Resolume software, you want to select Output and Advanced. What's going to happen here is you have input selection and output transformation. We're going to start with the output. We're going to select our screen 1 and we're going to map that to display 2. You can see behind me my wall just went black. The first thing you want to do is right here you want to select Show and Output. This is going to be really key and save us a lot of time. Select Slice 1 and let's double click it and call it F3 Left. And we're going to resize this. Keep in mind the panels are 128 wide, so 2 of them is 256 wide. And they're 256 tall and there's 2 of them, so that's 512 wide. And then our F3 is on our top left corner of our screen, so we're going to select left and top starting points 0 by 0. You know you did it right when you can see the box or the rectangle highlighted around the F3 section of the screen. As a quick note, you notice the top and the left is actually not showing the blue rectangle properly. A lot of different video sources will offset your X and Y start pixel by 1, either +1 or -1. It's not really that big of a deal. I just press to the right one and down run. And on my width, instead of 256 tall, I'm going to make it 255.5, see if that solves it. Oh, it doesn't because I can still see it going over into my F2, so I'm going to make it 255 wide. And that covers it. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this display, or this slice, I apologize. I'm going to rename that F3 right, and I'm going to duplicate it again, and I'm going to call this one F2. So for the F3 right, I'm literally just going to take that and slide it in a position. When I get it pretty close, I can use the arrows on my keyboard to finish the job there. All right, so that looks good right there. For my F2, I'm going to get this there. You can see it kind of locks in where it needs to. And then I'm going to slide this over. And you can use a lot of on-screen stuff here. You can really just click it, and if you don't know the actual values of your screen, you can just use this nice GUI to map it out for you, okay? But yeah, I'm pretty happy with the way that looks right now. The next step is I need to take all these here and I need to scale them to be the right size for each panel in my input selection. So go over to my input, select F2, and you can see right now that's definitely not right. What I want to do here, this is where you actually do need to know the math. So initially, I'm going to go ahead and take my calculator out so you can see the math that I'm doing. And let me bring this window down. Slide my calculator over here. And then I can bring this window back up. So my F2 is 168 wide. So if I do 168 times 3, then I know my width needs to be 504 wide. My height of the F2 panels are 336. I am going 4 tall, so times 4 is I'm 1344 tall on this. Okay. I know that this needs to start at the top. And I'm going to leave it where it is now. I'm not going to pick left or right for the moment. First, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my left F3. And once I get that placed, I'll butt this up right against it. So for the F3, I'm going to pretend it's an F2 panel for the actual resolution. So on my width, I'm going to do 168 times 2. That gives me 336. And for my height, I'm going to do 336 times 2. That's 672. And I know for a fact that this does go on my top left corner of my screen. So my top is 0 and my left is also 0. So now that I have that set, I can actually select my F2 and it'll snap into position right here next to my F2. And my F3 right is actually going to follow the exact same size. So again, 336 wide, 672 tall, my top is 0, and I can just slide this in to where it's right next to the F2. And at this point, those walls are scaled correctly. You can test this by saving and closing this out. All right, I'm going to save this. I'm going to call this working number 1. Close out. And when you bring up into your content, I actually like to use test patterns for anything I'm doing. So if I select the test pattern and bring it up on my screen, what you can see behind me is as the line goes from one panel to the other, it's very consistent. Okay? And then if I bring up an actual moving graphic, like this guy right here, again, you can see everything is moving in between the panels properly. So I think this is a valid point to just step back and point something out. What I did behind me is I set up the F3 and the F2 panels directly together. I did this intentionally because I wanted to point out the fact that when you're working with different video panels of different models, and also video panels of different batches, when you butt them up together, you can oftentimes see the color difference. And this is because your eye can reference it. A good practice is if your video panels are of different batches or different models, you definitely want to leave a little bit of a gap. Even if you leave 6 to 12 inches of gap between the F3 and the F2, for example, because your eye can't reference that so closely together, it's going to be a lot more passable. That being said, let's move on. So now that we got that out of the way, let's go back to our output. And I'm going to show you how to add in our video strips. So in output transformation, you can see, if I maximize this window here, you can see I'm sending these to each of our video wall sections. You can see in this one that they don't actually line up because I have to send it scaled differently for each one. And in my input selection, this is where you can actually see, if I highlight all of my panels here, here you can see what I'm actually sending, okay? There, you should see it lined up properly. If you have any alignment issues, this is where you need to address it. I'm going to go back to my output transformation. And if you remember in this window, I actually had 3 video strips angled on either side. I'm going to show you one of them, and then I'm going to show you the final outcome. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab one of my displays, I'm going to duplicate it, okay? And keep in mind, the width is going to end up being 144, and the height is going to be 5. Okay, so this matches, essentially this matches what my actual video strip is. And then I want to go ahead and drag this here. So you can see here, I can start seeing this on my actual screen. I'm going to roll my mouse here to zoom it in. All right. Now what I want to do here is I want to get it aligned. Okay, you can see there. I'm still not quite right. I'm going to keep going. And you have micro adjustments you can make over here. All right, so if I feel like that's a little better, we're almost there. That actually looks okay right there. I'm happy with that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my input selection. And here, I'm going to rename this F6 strip IP1. All right. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to resize this as well. And for my width, I've decided, because the length of my strip is 1 meter long in the real world, and the length of my highest resolution panel, the F2, is also 1 meter long, I'm going to match the LED resolution for my width. So my width is actually at 336 right now. And for my height, I'm going to select 7. Okay? And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to match what I see in the real world. So at this point, I'm going to click it. If you go to the corner in Resolume, you can adjust angles. And if you click the hand, you can go ahead and select out a little better. So that looks good right there. I am going to duplicate this. I'm going to call this F6 IP2. I'm going to slide this down. Wait a second. Yeah, I'm going to slide that down. And then on my output transformation on 2, I'm going to slide this down until I hit my other strip. Okay? There you go. And just go ahead and repeat that for all of your strips. You can see here, I'm getting to my other strip there. And if I go to my input, I want to slide that down as well to where we have appropriate input. And then if I zoom out, you can start to see that what I have in front of me in the real world is actually starting to take shape in my mapping. I have this already pre-mapped, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up my final mapping, and I'll show you what this looks like. Okay, so this is it mapped in the real world. I have all 6 of my strips mapped, and it's outputting quite nicely. If I save and close this, and I start opening up some content, you can see what it looks like, and it actually fits pretty well. I'm going to actually go ahead and open up some content that looks a little nicer for this type of setup. Okay, I can open up something like this. We have I have an effect on there that's actually, it's called edge glow in Resolume. Edge detection, I apologize. So if I turn off edge detection, you can see this is what it looked like initially. Whenever you're dealing with creative video strips and creative shapes, it's definitely beneficial to try and increase your contrast, and that's what I think edge detection works well with in Resolume. See? Looks really nice, and then I can see things moving in between the video strips. All right, guys, so what I want to show you now is I want to show you what happens when you do the wrong thing. I want to show you what happens instead of scaling things down to make it look nice and clean. I want to show you what happens when you scale up and how things can really quickly get distorted. Let's get started. All right, so for this example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to map everything in the opposite direction. I'm going to do it 100% wrong. I'm going to do the F6 strip IP as my lowest common denominator. That's a 6.9 millimeter pixel pitch. It's 144 long. So now my F3 and my F2 panels are going to be 144 tall by 72 wide. All right. So if I select F3 left, I am now 144 wide, and my height is 288. And again, of course, I want to go ahead and top that to the center, top left, and I'm going to copy those settings from my right wall. My height is 288, and my width is 144. Okay, and I'm going to move that up. Now I'm going to take my F2 wall. So I'm going to do 72 for my width times 3 equals 216. And for my height, I'm going to do 144 times 4 equals 576. Okay, so I can slide that up, slide it to the left, and then I can grab my F3 and slide that in there as well. At that point, I'm going to grab my strips. Let me save this to a new canvas. Always good practice. Do 13. So all my strips are going to be exact resolution, so 144 by 5. Okay. And we'll do the same thing with our ones on our right. All right. So at that point, I'm going to save this, and I'm going to bring up a test pattern. It's always good practice to test this with different test patterns. And one of the things you'll notice right off the bat is if you look at the lines between each of our different boxes, you see how it's extremely blurry. It's not clear. The only clear only the strips right now are actually clear. See, the strips are looking nice and crisp, nice and clean, because those are pixel to pixel accurate. However, the F3 and the F2, those are blurry. What I've done is I've actually stretched the content going to them, and I've pulled it out. So which means that either for a single LED, I might be sending only a half of a pixel of data to it, which means that you're going to have one LED black, one LED gray, and one LED white in between, instead of having a black LED right on top of a white LED like it should be. If I open up a different test pattern, you'll see maybe what I mean a little bit better. So you can see this one right here, we're seeing something very similar. We're seeing as the lines go across the screen, it's not clean, it's not crisp, it's not pure. So as you can see, this really doesn't scale very well when you're doing it in the wrong direction. Let me go ahead and load up my correct mapping, which is this guy right here. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And if I load another video, you can see very easily as the content moves around, there's no distortion, it's very clean, it's very crisp. All right guys, so that's everything I have for you on dynamic video setups. The next thing I want to move on to is dealing with canvas resizing. For that, I'm going to give you a brief overview of our video signal flow. This is actually something really important to understand when you're doing a setup of this nature. Let me lay out what we have behind me. So what we're starting with here is we are actually starting from a laptop. The laptop takes our raw content and it uses, Resolume is using that raw content to scale it and to resize it. So that's one level of processing right there. After that, we come HDMI out of the laptop into the drive behind me. And that's a conversion that occurs there as well. And then the drive takes that HDMI input and it converts it to the Novastar protocol to go to the video panels behind me. That's an additional conversion. All these different conversion levels will eventually distort your image. And if you have too many levels of conversion, you're going to start to get noise in your image. The noise could appear in the form of pixels and LEDs that just kind of flicker. So this is something you're going to want to be very careful about. You could also have a loss in grayscale if it's over-processed. The first thing we're going to start with is canvas size. If you're starting with input or output even from a drive or from a processor that's 1920 by 1080, and you're setting up your video walls, a couple years ago, that never would have been a problem. But what we're starting to see in the market right now, especially with the F2, for example, is when you go 4 panels tall, you've exceeded your 1080 height canvas size. You're at 1344. One of the reasons we set the F2 up behind us like that is for that very purpose. What happens when you exceed your 1080 canvas size? Can you increase your canvas? How do you do that? How do you start that? Let's get going and I'll show you how that works. All right guys, so one of the things you need to do is, I definitely recommend starting from your drive or your video processor and working your way back, because this is going to be the smallest common denominator. What you want to do is you want to determine your actual resolution of your screen, and this is from the outside to the outside. So if you have creative strips like the F6 strip IP, go ahead and determine, including all of your gaps in between if you have dead space, what is your maximum width and your maximum height. And you need to pick a number that meets or exceeds that. For this setup, our width is actually not that high, but our height is the one that has the problem. Our width doesn't actually meet 1920 wide, and this drive can go 3840. Our height is where the problem comes in. We are only, by default, this drive is 3840 wide by 1080 tall. So we need to change that. So I'm going to press menu, I'm going to scroll down to my input settings, and I want to start with one of the preset resolutions. And you can select resolution and refresh rate separately. And if one of my preset resolutions meets my requirement, then I'm good to go. The highest is 3840 by 1080, which was what this is set to when it leaves the manufacturer, when it leaves our office. If I leave it there, okay, what you're going to notice is that the wall gets cropped on the bottom because only 1080 pixels are being sent, not the 1340 that it requires. What I find for this particular setup, because I'm not particularly wide, I'm actually my width is very low. I'm not even at 1920 wide. What I actually find works quite well is 1536 by 1536. And I can keep my refresh rate at 60 Hertz. That's a pretty nice number to use most of the time. And right here, I can see that all of my screen is fully covered. And this is going to be a good solution for me. I don't see any stretching or distortion occurring. If you find that one of the preset resolutions is not suitable for you, you can go back in your input settings, scroll down to custom resolution, and you can see what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to bring this down to 1080 because I want to show you something. I want to demonstrate this for you. Okay, so when you go into custom resolution, what you might discover is that at the default resolution, I can increase my height, but I cap out at 1192. The driver has a limit to the bandwidth that it can process. This means for your video input, you have to balance the video refresh rate with the video resolution. In order to increase the available height of the canvas, you must sacrifice the video refresh rate, or you must sacrifice the input resolution in order to increase the refresh rate. By doing this, you maintain proper balance of the total bandwidth and prevent the processor from overheating. Keep in mind, you can use multiple drivers for a single wall if you max out one. You can do this using the Image Mosaic software settings along with the Genlock ports on the back of the drivers in order to synchronize everything together. The only way to get my height above 1192 into the 1344 I need in this scenario is I either need to reduce the width or I need to reduce the refresh rate. So if I keep my refresh rate at 60 and I lower down my width, let's say 3650, you can see it's going to allow me to increase my height. Not quite where I need it though. This is going to be a little trial and error to get the requirement that you need, mainly for the fact that video wall is so modular and you can really have any setup that you desire. And it looks like I can be at 1344 tall, and at 1344 tall, my maximum width is going to be 3398. When I'm ready, select apply. Back out. Make sure my 3398 by 1344, I need to make sure that this is duplicated on my video source. In this case, this is my laptop. If you have any video processor in between your drive and your video source, you need to make sure that that is also set to the same resolution, or else you're going to have distortion. And those are the main points I wanted you to consider when adjusting your canvas size. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. It was a lot of fun sharing this information with you. I really hope you learned something that you can take to your next gig. I'm going to be hanging out after this video, so if you have any questions that I didn't answer in the video, please share them so we can do our best to answer them. Until next time, this is Anthony Chiappone with CHAUVET Professional, and this was Tech Talk.